This video will focus exclusively on the special features available in some of the filters we'll look at. If you haven't already seen the Using Filters introduction, you might want to view that video first. Here in this setup, the first thing I've done is darken the stage a little bit to make some of the filter effects a little more obvious, and then I'm going to repeatedly apply a filter to a row of movie clips and illustrate the effects of some of these special options. To keep things moving, I'll talk about drop shadow, bevel, and glow, but other filters have some of these special features as well. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is start with the first row and use drop shadow. So I'm going to select the first snowboarder, come down to our Properties Inspector and switch to the Filters tab, and then choose drop shadow from the pop-down menu. Alright, and I'm going to soften this up a little bit. I'm going to set a blur X and Y to 10, and I'll set the strength to perhaps 60, and let's use a quality of high. So that looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to copy that filter, and I'm going to select the 3 remaining snowboarders, and then paste. So now I've applied that filter effect, that drop shadow, to the entire first row. Okay, now I'm going to use this first snowboarder as a sort of control, so I'm not going to modify him further. So I'll move on to the second item, and in this case I'm going to use the knockout feature. And as you can see, it's kept the drop shadow intact, but cut out from that shadow the area that used to be described by the opaque pixels of the movie clip. So you can use this to overlay an underlying image and achieve an alpha channel and that kind of effect. All right, let's move on to the third item, and let's look at inner shadow. And this isn't as obvious here, so let's kind of boost that up a bit. Let's give it a distance of 10. And now you get the effect that this artwork has kind of been punched out of the stage. It's been pushed in instead of elevated above. So here I have a shadow being cast by the snowboarder. Here I have a shadow being cast by the stage. Okay, and then lastly, this fourth item, I'll come down and choose Hide Object. And what's really great about this is that it will keep the drop shadow intact in its entirety and hide the element that is casting the shadow. Okay, let's switch filters and focus on our second row, and let's take a look at bevel. So let's select all 3 of these movie clips this time, and we'll come down and choose bevel. And let's take a look at each special feature one at a time, again using our first movie clip as a control. So this is a standard inner bevel. Let's move over to the second option and switch to an outer bevel. So you can see a sharper edge on the inside of the snowboarder and the bevel being on the outside pulling up from the stage. Here you have sort of a satiny inner bevel, so all of the elevation is inside the snowboarder. Okay, and then finally here on the third snowboarder, let's choose Knockout. That again will knock out the underlying bevel effects. You could see through it, and you could take advantage of that by overlaying this onto an underlying piece of artwork and forming an instant button, which of course I'll demonstrate here in the fourth column as you see where I'm headed. And we can also take a look at the knockout for outer, and there's also an option for full, which will do both inner and outer bevels. So you can use these for whatever purpose that suits your particular project. Let's switch back to, let's say, outer for this case. Okay, lastly for bevel, let's take a look at the special button effect. Let's come up and double-click to edit the button. And you'll see that in the first frame I have a bevel effect in place, but if I remove it, you'll see this is nothing more than a simple movie clip. It's just a rectangular white square. So I've brought in my rectangular movie clip to apply my effect to, and I'm choosing bevel, and I want to create a very slight effect in my initial up state. So let's set the blur X and Y to 1, and let's set the distance offset to 1. So if I deselect, you'll see a very subtle bevel all the way around, and I'm going to reselect and choose Knockout. So now I can see through the button, and I can lay this over artwork and make it seem like I've created all these various beveled states of the art. And let's go over to the over frame, and in this case you see that I have increased the bevel. I'm back to my default 5 blur X and Y and distance offset. And finally, here in the down state, all the while continuing to use this knockout feature, this is different because I've set my distance to -5, so it's beveling down instead of up. And then finally, for safety, I have an extra hit state just to make sure I'm covering all the active pixels. Okay, so what's the benefit of this? Let's go back to scene 1, and the effect is that I can reuse this button over and over again, and it looks like I've created all of this beveled artwork. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to create a new layer that I can put underneath the art that I've created so far. and let's just call this photo. And I'm going to then come to my library, and I'm going to drag in a bitmap that will serve as the basis for this button art. And it's a little bit bigger than the default button I just created, so I'm going to scale this button. I'll just bring this button over here, and then use the free transform tool, and I'll put the transform point in the upper left corner and just make it large enough to cover the artwork. Okay, so now when I deselect, you could see that it's got a little bit of a button bevel. And just for a quick demonstration, I'm going to come up to my control menu and say Enable Simple Buttons. And you'll see now when I roll over, I get my up state, and when I press, I get my down state, and I let go, and it looks like I've created all of these custom pieces of artwork. So I can recycle this button from use to use over image after image, and I don't have to create all those individual Photoshop bevels. Okay, let's move on then to the last item, which is the glow filter. Let's show more of our stage at once by double-clicking on the hand tool, and let's go to our selection tool and choose the first movie clip in the last row. Let's then come down to the filters tab and give that movie clip a glow filter, and let's choose the default values. Let's copy that filter, and let's select the next two movie clips. I have something in mind for the last one, and come down and paste. So now we have the glow filter in each of the first three movie clips in the bottom row. All right, again, this is our control, so let's choose the second snowboarder, and let's apply the knockout. So here again we see a glow border all the way around, but nothing in the center. And then let's choose the third, and let's choose an inner glow. And this will allow you to kind of give this sort of on-fire look or this nice hazy, misty look. Let's, for instance, switch to white. And we can increase the blur X and Y to perhaps 10. And then you'll see that kind of softened edge inside the snowboarder. Lastly, I want to use this glow filter to our advantage to highlight an area of interest. So here on this fourth snowboarder, I just have these black movie clips, these circles in place. And I want to take one of them and come over and give it a glow filter. And then apply the knockout. And it's a little light. Let's bump up the blur X and Y to 10, and that will better highlight our area of interest. As I deselect, you can see I'm focusing in on the gloves. Perhaps I'm selling gloves on our snowboarding website, and I want to highlight that area. And let's select that and then copy, and then select each of the remaining areas of interest on our graphic, and then paste. So you can see here we're focusing in on gloves, helmet, boots, and perhaps the tail to talk about the edging or the tail fin of the snowboard as a feature. I hope this overview has been helpful and that you can put these special features to good use.